Well, good morning and welcome. I can tell you I'm delighted to see the audience that we have here today. I see some customs commissioners out there, trade officials, the private sector. So welcome all. You're just the group that we had hoped to come. Before I get into my remarks, they asked me, this is a little unique as well, they asked me to give a few opening remarks and act as the moderator of the session. And before I get into my remarks, I want to just mention how pleased we are, the U.S. Agency of International Development, to be co-hosting this with the World Customs Organization. And I wanted to explain just a minute what the relationship is. You heard Mr. Eric Kick speak about the WCO develops the international best practices, principles, conventions, and procedures. USAID, as a donor organization, promote those practices, principles, and procedures that are developed by the WCO. We don't develop these procedures ourselves. We didn't invent any of these tools that you're going to hear about this morning. But we work with the WCO to promote the tools that they have developed and they are promoting. And then, as a donor, we have the resources to provide technical assistance and support to any of the countries within this region that want to implement those tools. So that's basically the relationship between us and the WCO. So I'm really delighted to have them here today to tell you more about what those procedures and processes are. As a regional trade advisor for USAID, I am a strong believer and advocate for trade-based growth or export-led growth. In my long career with USAID, I have had the privilege of seeing firsthand the dramatic impact, the positive impact on economic growth in jobs that an export-led economic growth strategy can have. However, and you heard some of that earlier at the first session, sub-Saharan Africa has been pretty much left behind in the explosive trade growth that has happened globally over the last 20 years. Now, this morning, I don't want to go over the numbers and talk about the past performance. We're here today to learn about trade facilitation tools that can unleash the potential that you have here in Southern Africa. We want to talk about the potential opportunities and benefits that can be yielded by adopting some of these tools. And I do just have a couple of slides that I want to show that I think will illustrate quite clearly what some of that potential benefits can be. And I am going to look at just a few figures. In terms of virtually every study that I have read about trade in sub-Saharan Africa, the time and cost of exporting and importing is identified as the #1 culprit in holding back the potential. And so this illustrates sub-Saharan Africa average takes 31 days from the time a factory gets the order till it actually gets on the boat to leave the region or to cross the border intra-regionally. 31 days. Here in South Africa, it takes 30 days. So you beat the sub-Saharan African average, but just barely. Now, one of your SADC neighbors, Mauritius, it takes only 13 days. The OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, their average is 10 days. The US is 6, and #1 in the world, Singapore, it takes only 5 days. Now, the World Bank undertook a study, and their economists came up with an estimate. The study is actually called Trade in Time, and they estimate for every 1 day that you can reduce the time of export, it will increase your export by at least 1%. Okay, that's pretty impressive. So if South Africa was to match what its SADC partner Mauritius does, 13 days, that's a difference of 17 days, or a difference of potential increase of 17%. Let's see what that impact would be. Last year, South Africa's exports were 104.5 billion. Now, if they could reduce from 30 days to 13 days, that would have increased by $17.765 billion alone just by reducing the time to export. I believe that's 145 billion rands. And that translates, my friends, into jobs, jobs, jobs. Okay, that's all you have to do. Reduce your time from 30 days to 13. Sounds easy, right? No, it's not. But it is possible. And it's possible through some of these trade facilitation tools that we're going to be introducing that are proven to dramatically reduce the time and cost of exporting. And I think of all those trade facilitation tools, I'm lucky to get to chair the panel which I think has the most powerful impact on trade facilitation, and that's the single window. Now the single window, it's my understanding, was developed by Singapore, a trade entrepot that is required to have competitive trade. And in 1989, they launched their TradeNet program. Now, it has evolved and developed, I think, every single year since then. Because trade's so important, they keep adopting the latest technology, the biggest bandwidth, the most impressive software. And in 2004, they started calling it the single window. I don't think it's a coincidence that Singapore was the first and is recognized today as having the best single window. And it also happens to rank #1 in global competitiveness, #1 on the Doing Business Index, #1 in the trading cross borders, virtually #1 in every measurement related to trade. Well, Singapore is a member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. That's Southeast Asia's equivalent of SAC. And Singapore's neighbors in ASEAN took notice of the benefits that Singapore was resulting from their single window, and they decided that they would emulate that success. And in 2005, the 10 ASEAN member countries agreed as ASEAN to create an ASEAN single window. And what the plan was, all 10 of the member countries would develop a national single window, which could be then connected into a regional single window, and then the benefits that each country get would be multiplied exponentially. So that was the plan. Now, I mentioned that I had witnessed firsthand the benefits in jobs and growth that an export-led economic strategy can have. That's because I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia. And I was actually in Thailand in 2009 when I heard a presentation from their Commissioner of Customs. And he said, look, we're a member of ASEAN, we agreed to do a single window. And in 2007, we decided it was time to start fulfilling that obligation, and we started building our single window. Now, I heard the presentation from this Commissioner of Customs in 2010, and I asked for his permission to take this slide from his presentation. When they began, on the Trade and Cross-Border Index, look across here at 2007, they were ranked 108 in trading across borders. Within only 2 years of implementing their single window, they had increased to 12. More importantly, the commissioner said that they were now saving $1.5 billion per year for their importers and exporters. And the Commissioner of Customs gave the full credit for this dramatic jump and for these dramatic savings to their single window. And I would like to also point out, if you look at time to export, they moved from 24, that's the second line there, they moved from taking 24 days to only 14 days. So they moved 10 days forward, or increased their exports by over 10% by introducing their single window. So such a move as I suggested would be possible for South Africa has been done by Thailand. And believe me, Thailand is not known for its organizational efficiency, but they were able to implement it, and they're benefiting from it. So the point of this is some of these tools are available and they're proven to work. So let's find out a little bit more about them. I mentioned that Singapore basically created the single window and maintains the best single window in operation today. That single window was actually developed and is operated by a private company called Crimson Logic. Now, all of the speakers that are here today, their biographies are in front of you. And since we are time sensitive, I'm not going to give their CVs. I'll ask that you read them. But I'm telling you that I'm quite pleased today to have with us a representative of Crimson Logic, Kunwibun Chowjiropa, who is here to talk about, he has been with Crimson Logic, I believe, for 10 years. So he's going to talk about the 10 years global experience of the single window in the world today. So with that introduction, I'd like to welcome Mr. Wibun.